South Korea, the US, Japan, and several other countries initiate a new mechanism to keep track of North Korea slipping through the net to violate UN sanctions as an alternative to the now defunct UN panel of experts. Polls just closed for by-elections. It's a small election to decide Seoul's education chief as well as heads of 4 local governments, but its political impact could mean a great deal. Employment expanded by over 100,000 from the previous year in September, with uneven job growth across industries and age groups. It's October 16th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. A sanctions monitoring system on North Korea is back on. A group of countries, including South Korea, the US, and Japan, have announced a fresh initiative to monitor UN sanctions on the regime. This follows Russia opposing the renewal of a related panel at the United Nations. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pyongyang has our top story.
In March, Russia blocked the renewal of a panel of experts that oversees the enforcement of United Nations sanctions on North Korea's nuclear programs. It vetoed a 1-year extension, bringing an end to the group's 15 years of operation, leading to strong criticism from South Korea and other countries. Since then, Seoul has been working with Washington and other like-minded nations on ways to find a replacement, including creating a framework outside of the United Nations. And on Wednesday, South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Kim Hong-kyun and his American and Japanese counterparts, Kurt Campbell and Masataka Okano, who met in Seoul on Wednesday, announced that the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, or MSMT, will be established to help fill the void in monitoring North Korea-related sanctions.
In light of the veto, which disbanded the UN Security Council's 1718 Committee panel of experts this year, we hereby express our intention to establish the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, MSMT, a multilateral mechanism to monitor and report violations and evasions of the sanctions measures stipulated in the relevant UNSCRs.
For now, South Korea, the US, Japan, as well as 8 other countries, including France, the UK, and Germany, have decided to join the initiative, and the 3 officials call for more support from other UN member states. The goal of the MSMT is to publicly report on the implementation of UN sanctions on North Korea, issuing critical reports on a wide range of topics, including North Korea's illicit cyber activities and maritime sanctions evasion activities. Calling this a remarkable achievement, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State said Russia and China's failure to support the renewal of the UN panel of experts will not stop other countries from monitoring North Korea's actions.
We are here to make sure that their efforts will not prevent public reporting on sanctions violations and evasion of activities that generate revenue for the DPRK's unlawful and destabilizing WMD and ballistic missile programs.
The UN panel of experts have published reports twice a year, but South Korea's foreign ministry said that in addition to the regular reports, the MSMT is also considering issuing separate detailed reports on specific issues from time to time and present them in public briefings at the Security Council. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Breaking away from its pattern, North Korea's state media is yet to carry coverage of the regime's recent detonation of the land links to South Korea. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung explains what could be the reason.
North Korea staying silent about its blowing up of inter-Korean roads on Tuesday. The North's main newspaper, the Nodongshinmun, did not carry any reports about the destruction of the cross-border roads that were once seen as a symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. Usually, the state-run news agency for readers outside North Korea, the Korean Central News Agency, runs reports of the outcomes of the major events early the next day. But as of Tuesday morning, the KCNA did not have any news either. This is in contrast to a previous case when the state media reported the North's demolition of the Joint Liaison Office in Kaesong in June 2020. At that time, the KCNA promptly reported the news on the same day, while the 노동신문 carried the report the following day. An expert says the regime is trying to assess the situation.
Up until now, North Korea has been pushing hard, issuing statements, taking military actions, and informing their citizens through state media. It seems like they are now taking a moment to see the reaction of its own people, South Korea, and the international community, including the U.S., before deciding to keep going.
Washington, on the other hand, voiced its concerns, with the State Department urging North Korea on Tuesday to stop actions that would increase the risk of conflict, while reiterating calls for Pyongyang to come back to diplomacy. A State Department spokesperson also added that Washington is monitoring the situation in the north in close coordination with South Korea. Meanwhile, group tours around the demilitarized zone, which were temporarily suspended on Tuesday following a request from the South Korean army, resumed on Wednesday after a risk assessment. The tourist sites include the Tora Observatory in Paju, along with the Gosang Unification Observation Tower in Gangwon-do Province, locations where visitors can tour the DMZ area. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In another clear sign of closer Russia-North Korea ties, the latest Ukrainian reports say Pyongyang is sending thousands of North Korean troops to Russia for fighting. Cha Yun-kyung has more.
Major Ukrainian media outlets reported on Tuesday local time, citing military sources, that Russia has formed a special battalion of 3,000 North Korean troops. It added that the battalion could be deployed to Kursk Oblast in Russia to fight off the Ukrainian offensive, and that North Korea has supplied them with ammunition. The Kyiv Independent newspaper, citing Western sources, reports that North Korea has sent 10,000 soldiers to Russia in total, while Suspin, citing unnamed intelligence officials, reported that the Russian army began tracing the whereabouts of 18 North Korean soldiers who had been deployed to the Russian border but have since deserted. Ukrainian media also reported that 6 North Korean soldiers were among the 20 or so killed in a missile attack in the Donetsk region earlier this month, fueling reports that North Korea sent 3,000 soldiers to fight alongside Russia in that conflict.
Among the main issues was a report from the intelligence services, the Foreign Intelligence Service and the GUR, military intelligence, regarding the intentions of the Russians for autumn and winter. Everything is quite detailed, the effective involvement of North Korea in the war.
The Kremlin has dismissed the claims as a fake news story. On the other hand, White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby said the confirmation of North Korean soldiers fighting on Russia's side can only be classified as a new level of desperation by Putin as he continues to try to make progress in Ukraine, in addition to the deepening relations between Russia and North Korea. Meanwhile, Washington said while it was concerned about the reports, it did not independently confirm them. There is concern within the U.S. military command regarding North Korean troops raising their combat capabilities through actual fighting. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Voting closed a short while ago for by-elections here in Korea, choosing Seoul's new superintendent for education and the heads of 4 local governments. The winners are expected to be revealed later tonight. For more, our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo is standing by live. Si-hoo, how is the voter turnout looking?
Jung-min, as you said, the polls just closed for this October's by-elections, the first voting since April's general election. Polling began at 6 this morning, and if you look at the map right here, voters cast their ballots to pick new leaders in these regions. They voted for an education superintendent in the capital Seoul and the heads of district in the cities of Busan and Incheon and 2 counties in Jeollanam-do Province. They are Yeonggwang and Gokseong-gun counties. Now, as of 7:30 this evening, just 30 minutes before closing, the turnout was 21.6% in Seoul and a combined 52.4% for the rest. The turnout for the superintendent is just 0.4% above the record low from 2009, but the turnout for the rest exceeds the average for most recent years. But we have to note that for this election, the voting hours were extended by 2 hours until 8 o'clock to give people enough time to vote because today wasn't an official public holiday. So we expect more people to have voted in the final hour before closing, after they got off work and before they headed home for the evening.
When do we expect to hear the final results, and what's the significance of this fall's by-elections?
Right, so it will be several hours before all the ballots from today and also 2 days of early voting last week are tallied. And it'll be at least near midnight tonight until we hear the final winners announced. As I said earlier, this election is the first to take place following the general election. So this time, the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party are up against each other once again in some of the most politically divided regions in the country. The traditionally conservative city of Busan, and on the other hand, the traditionally liberal province of Jeollanam-do. The strength and ability of the rival parties' leaderships are also being tested through this election, and so they have to put in special efforts to win votes in these regions, traveling far and often to meet local residents. Let's listen to their final pleas for votes from this morning.
This election decides the local servants who will begin working immediately tomorrow. Please exercise your right to vote by voting for the candidates who will do their job right.
We citizens must all go out and vote. Living our own lives is important, but the world can change entirely depending on who manages the government and administration.
Now, tonight's winners will serve the remainder of the term for each vacancy through to the first half of 2026. Jung-min.
All right, that was our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo live from the National Assembly. Thank you. On the economic front, employment expanded by well over 100,000 jobs in September, with senior workers actively seeking to join the workforce, while those in their 20s and 40s stayed on the sidelines. Our Lee Soo-jin covers these findings.
Employment in South Korea increased by more than 100,000 on year for the third straight month in September. Data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday showed that there were 28.84 million people in employment last month, up 144,000 from the previous year. The on-year job growth recovered to the 100,000 range in July and has stayed there for 3 consecutive months. But job growth was uneven across both industries and age groups. The increase last month was most prominent in the information and communication sector, with the figure going up by 105,000 on year. But the wholesale and retail sector fell by 104,000, the 7th straight month of decline and the sharpest decline since November 2021. The construction sector also fell by 100,000, the 5th straight fall and the largest drop since 2013, when relevant data for the sector was first compiled.
The construction sector is sluggish because of raw material costs and the decline in new construction. The wholesale and retail sector has been seeing a downward trend due to unmanned kiosks and online shopping.
By age group, job growth was mainly driven by those aged 60 and above, with 272,000 more people of that age in jobs compared to last year. Those in their 30s and 50s also saw job growth, but the job figures fell for those aged 15 to 29 as well as those in their 40s. In a ministerial economic meeting on Wednesday, the finance minister acknowledged the drop in employment in the construction sector and among young people, pledging to carry out more measures.
We have plans to improve the work environment for skilled construction workers to attract new workers to the industry, which has been experiencing a decline in employment. Employment training for young people will also be expanded.
He added that the government will also build an industrial ecosystem where companies have the capacity to continuously create quality jobs. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Sales of books by author Kang have soared past 1 million following her winning of this year's Nobel Prize for Literature. Han has kept her media engagement to a minimum by sharing her desire to simply and quietly write stories. Park Go-nu tells us more.
The books of South Korea's first Nobel Literature Prize winner Kang are selling at an unprecedented speed. According to 3 major Korean bookstore chains as of 9 a.m. Wednesday, throughout the 6 days following the Nobel Prize win, over 1 million copies of Han Kang's books have been sold. It's reportedly unusual for several books by a single author that aren't new releases to have this many copies sold within a week. Sales of ebook versions reached around 70,000 during the same period. Along with their acclaimed literary work, The Vegetarian, Human Acts and We Do Not Part have made up the top 3 most sold.
It's an unprecedented record because it's a challenge in itself to surpass 1 million copies in the digital era, compared to when it was common in the 80s and 90s. This goes beyond people just wanting to read the novel and shows their strong desire to own the actual book. The author's new releases will probably see increases in sales as well.
Despite her popularity, Han, during an interview with Swedish public service television company SVT, said that she doesn't want the spotlight and wants to stay quiet and peacefully thinking about the meaning of the prize. She also said she would like to concentrate on finishing her new novel and then writing her Nobel Prize acceptance speech. Han is set to receive her Nobel Prize in Literature at the ceremony held in Sweden on December 10th. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Concerns over deepfake sex crimes have led to pledges of tougher penalties to punish and prevent such offenses. Now, what's the road ahead? To delve into this topic, we have our political correspondent Shin Ha-young here in the studio. Hi, Ha-young.
Good evening, Jung-min.
Evening, and deepfake sex crimes are such a big issue worldwide, and it's pretty much the same here in Korea.
You're right, Jung-min. In fact, over half of the global victims of deepfake sex crimes between July and August last year were Korean. And with foreign media also paying attention to South Korea's response, various measures are being introduced. And recently, I had the chance to talk about the measures with a representative from a victim advocacy center and an expert on these crimes. Let's first take a look. Most suspects in deepfake sex crimes in South Korea are classmates of the victims. Young victims often continue to face their perpetrators even after reporting the crimes due to limited punitive measures. This is according to an official from the state-run advocacy center for online sexual abuse victims, highlighting that most of those seeking support are teenagers. Data from the Korean National Police Agency shows nearly 60% of victims reported between 2021 and last year were in their teens. Amid the rise in these crimes, victims commonly pointed out the lack of adequate punishments for offenders.
We surveyed 100 victims, and their biggest challenge was getting the content completely removed. Another issue was the lack of punishment for offenders. Victims feel that proper education and punishment are needed to help eliminate these crimes.
In response, the cabinet last week gave the green light to a bundle of amendments passed by the National Assembly that will impose tougher punishment for deepfake pornography. Under the revised measures, those who own or watch such content will face up to 3 years in prison or a fine of 30 million Korean won or around $22,000, while creators and distributors will also face harsher penalties than they do now. Police will be allowed to start emergency identity non-disclosure investigations into sex offenses against minors without prior approval. To better support victims, a legal basis will be established to expand and operate the advocacy center nationwide. An expert said other measures are also needed to ensure the strengthened penalties are effective.
To ensure punishment, we need to improve the efficiency of arrests and provide legal support that addresses the anonymity of deepfake sex crimes. This includes expanding the range of undercover investigations and supporting the officers involved. A coordinated government approach is needed, including preventive education.
The official from the Advocacy Center welcomed the move but also called for expanding undercover investigations to include adult victims.
Victims often only find out about the crime long after it occurs, leaving them frustrated as they can't track where the content is being shared. The victims include not only minors, but also adults, which is why undercover investigations should be expanded to include adult victims as well.
Meanwhile, South Korea unveiled a national cybersecurity basic plan last month, which outlines offensive cyber defense operations and strategies to tackle disinformation, including deepfakes.
Ha-young, we can't talk about the this issue without addressing teenage offenders. How should the country tackle this issue?
Well, some experts say that reconsidering the age threshold for juvenile criminal responsibility is crucial, while others believe that education should come first. And this is a contentious issue because over 80% of suspects are teens, with about 2 in 10 below the legal age for prosecution. And the experts suggested that reforming the juvenile justice system should take priority over punishment or education. Take a listen.
Juvenile justice system needs comprehensive reform ahead of any punishment or education. With improved infrastructure, we can effectively punish or educate the youth offenders of deepfake crimes.
And would you elaborate on the support that victims can receive through the Victim Advocacy Center that you mentioned in your report?
Of course, Jungmin. The Advocacy Center for Online Sexual Abuse Victims supports both South Korean citizens and foreign residents by assisting with deepfake content removal and offering counseling. And it's best to contact the center by phone, but victims can also use the online bulletin board. And before I wrap up my coverage tonight, one last thing I'd like to share from the center is the issue of secondary victimization. The official said that when victims are blamed, they may hesitate to report their experiences, leading to unreported crimes and allowing perpetrators to commit more crimes. So it is important to improve awareness of this issue.
All right. Hayoung, thanks for your report today.
My pleasure.
After a chilly morning, the temperature rose to around 24 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day in Seoul. We'll see clear skies tomorrow as well. In particular, temperatures in the central parts of the country will be higher than today, so it will feel a little hot. The daily temperature range is wide, so make sure to bring your jacket on your way to work. The waves will be high on the east coast by tomorrow. There are places where high waves cross the seashores or breakwaters, so please be careful when approaching the waterfront. Tomorrow's Seoul and Daejeon will start off at 14 degrees. Highs will move up to 25 in Daejeon, Gwangju, Busan, and Jeju. From tomorrow night, starting with Jeju Island, it will rain across the country between Friday and Saturday. Daily highs in Seoul will also fall below 20 degrees from the weekend, and morning temperatures will drop to single digits. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.